Ever felt the crushing weight of being judged the moment someone sees you? That suffocating feeling when the odds are stacked and the powerful dismiss you as nothing? Today, we're diving into the incredible true story of Marcus Thorne, a Black U.S. attorney. He was a man dedicated to justice, yet he found himself dragged from his car, slammed with false charges, all because of a fabricated traffic stop in a quiet Texas suburb. He walked into a courtroom where the judge seemed to side with the very officers who attacked him. But what happened next? Well, Marcus was about to reveal a secret that would shock the entire courtroom, expose a deep vein of systemic injustice, and prove that real power doesn't come from a badge on a uniform, but from the truth in your hand. It was late at night in Oakwood Heights, Texas, a quiet suburb just outside Houston. The streets, usually calm after sundown, were lit only by the occasional hum of traffic lights flickering from red to green. Marcus Thorne, a seasoned assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Texas, had just left a late dinner with colleagues. His mind was on unwinding, on the warmth of his family waiting at home, not on work, injustice, or courtrooms. But that peaceful thought evaporated the moment he saw flashing red and blue lights paint his rearview mirror. He sighed, a weary release of breath, signaled, pulled over, and reached for his wallet. He wasn't speeding, he hadn't run a light. There was no legitimate reason for a stop. But Marcus knew better than to assume reason had anything to do with it. This was a lived experience for many Black Americans. The preemptive sigh, the prepared compliance, the deep-seated knowledge that reason often didn't apply when certain lights flashed behind you. It's a silent script many are forced to follow, a stark contrast to the casual stops others might take for granted. Two figures emerged from the blinding glare of the squad car's headlights. Officer Ryan "Hammer" Hayes, tall and broad with a military cut, moved with an almost aggressive confidence as he approached the driver's side. Officer Dustin "Viper" Jenkins, leaner but no less imposing, hovered near the passenger door, a silent shadow. "License and registration," Hammer demanded, his voice clipped, his eyes cold and unyielding. Marcus, maintaining the calm he'd perfected in countless tense courtrooms, handed over his documents. "May I ask why I was stopped?" Hammer glanced at Viper, a subtle, almost imperceptible exchange, before answering. "Your taillight's out." Marcus's brow furrowed. That was a blatant lie. His car, barely a month off the lot, had just passed inspection with flying colors, and a quick, subtle glance in his rearview mirror confirmed his brake lights were fully functional, blazing red in the reflection. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice carefully even, his poker face firmly in place. Hammer's expression shifted just slightly, a hardening around his eyes. He leaned in, his voice dropping, carrying an edge of authority that wasn't a request. "Sir, step out of the vehicle." A slow, creeping tension, cold and unwelcome, spread through Marcus's limbs. He'd prosecuted cases exactly like this, cases where a routine stop, based on a fabricated excuse, became a nightmare of escalating aggression and false charges. His instinct, honed by years of legal practice, screamed at him to comply, to defuse the situation. But his life experience, rooted in countless encounters like this, told him these officers were already escalating, pushing boundaries, looking for an excuse, any excuse, to turn a non-existent violation into a full-blown arrest. This wasn't about a taillight. It was about control. It was about power. And it was just the beginning. "Because we said so." Viper's voice cut through the quiet night, his words dripping with a chilling arrogance as he rested his hand pointedly on his belt, an almost theatrical gesture of implied threat. Marcus took a breath, letting the silent defiance of his posture speak for itself. He knew the law. He had spent years studying, enforcing, and defending it in federal courtrooms. He knew he didn't have to get out of the car unless there was probable cause, a legitimate reason, not a manufactured one. "I'm within my rights to ask why I'm being ordered out of my car," Marcus stated, his voice firm, controlled, refusing to rise to their bait. Hammer's patience, thin as it was, snapped. With a sudden, violent yank, he wrenched the car door open. "Step out now." Before Marcus could react, before his mind could process the sudden shift to aggression, Hammer grabbed his wrist, yanking him forward. The seatbelt caught his chest, digging painfully into his shoulder as he was pulled abruptly from his seat. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus barked, instinctively pulling back against the sudden, brutal force. Hammer didn't answer. He just grabbed harder, his grip like iron, his face set in a grim mask. Within seconds, Viper was on the other side, wrenching Marcus's other arm behind his back. The sharp, cold edge of metal cuffs bit into his skin, a sickening click echoing in the stillness of the night. "You're resisting," Hammer said coldly, the accusation a venomous lie designed to justify their actions. Marcus stared in disbelief, his eyes wide, as Viper pressed him roughly against the hood of his own car, forcing his head down, the cool metal against his cheek, the hard pressure on his arms. It was a sensory overload, yet his mind remained horrifyingly clear. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a game, a setup. They had chosen him, manufactured a pretext, and now they were painting him as the aggressor, and they thought they had already won. They thought his professional calm, his insistence on his rights, made him a threat they needed to subdue, but they were about to realize just how wrong they were. Later, in the harsh, fluorescent glow of the precinct's booking room, the atmosphere was thick with the officers' smug satisfaction. Marcus was slammed with charges: resisting arrest, obstruction, disorderly conduct, a laundry list of fabrications designed to bury him in the system. He listened, silent and infuriated, as Hammer and Viper embellished their story to the booking officer. Painting Marcus as an aggressive, uncooperative suspect, every word was a calculated lie, carefully crafted to ensure his guilt before he even saw a judge. From a cold, grimy holding cell, Marcus managed to make a call to his colleague, attorney Sarah Jenkins. Her voice, usually calm and composed, was laced with palpable concern. "Marcus, you know how these cases go here in Oakwood. It's almost always their word against yours. Unless you have hard proof." She didn't need to finish the sentence. He knew. He'd prosecuted countless cases, seen far too many innocent people, especially black men, fall victim to this exact scenario, their rights ignored, their protests dismissed, their lives derailed by the word of an officer. This isn't just about a bad apple or an isolated incident. This section exposes the raw mechanics of police misconduct, how a minor traffic stop can be weaponized into an arrest by leveraging authority and pre-existing biases. The immediate consequences are devastating: false charges, a night in jail, a tarnished record. But the long-term impact can be even more severe, affecting careers, reputations, and trust in the very systems designed to protect. This scenario highlights a common, heartbreaking reality: the inherent power imbalance in he said, she said situations in court, where the officer's word almost always takes precedence. For Marcus, this wasn't just a personal injustice. It was a blueprint of systemic failure. And the rage he felt, that simmering anger, was fueled by the knowledge that without concrete evidence, the truth often doesn't matter. But Marcus was about to prove that sometimes the truth has its own unseen power. The courtroom in East Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse was packed, the air thick with the usual sounds of bureaucracy: clerks shuffling papers, the occasional cough, the quiet hum of whispered conversations. But beneath that, something else simmered. It was a palpable tension, a subtle prejudice that Marcus felt acutely. He sat at the defense table, his posture rigid but composed, the weight of the fabricated charges heavy on his shoulders. He wasn't here as an attorney today. He was the defendant, facing a mountain of lies. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that in this setting, the truth didn't always matter. Only what could be proven. At the front of the room, Judge Eleanor Vance peered down from the bench. In her mid-60s, she had the kind of presence that commanded authority, earned or not. Her reputation was clear, firm, uncompromising, and famously dismissive of nonsense, especially from defendants representing themselves or, as was often whispered in the legal corridors, certain defendants. From the way she barely looked at Marcus, barely acknowledged his presence, he already knew where this was going. The prosecutor, Daniel Miller, walked with the kind of smug confidence that came from knowing the odds were stacked firmly in his favor. He straightened his tie and nodded to Officers Hammer and Viper, who sat proudly at the witness stand, their faces masks of self-satisfaction. They knew they had the full weight of the system behind them. "Your Honor," Miller began, his voice smooth, authoritative, "this is a simple case of an individual escalating a routine traffic stop into a physical altercation with law enforcement." Marcus exhaled slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the audacity, the arrogance of the lie. Miller continued, flipping through his notes with an air of practiced ease. "The defendant refused to comply with officers' lawful orders, became aggressive, and had to be restrained for the safety of all involved." Marcus's lawyer, public defender Thomas Rodriguez, an overworked and underpaid advocate, shot up from his chair. "Objection! There is zero evidence that my client was aggressive." Judge Vance waved a hand dismissively, almost before Rodriguez finished speaking. "Overruled." Marcus clenched his jaw. That was fast. Rodriguez sighed, a flicker of resignation in his eyes, but pressed forward. "Your Honor, the officers escalated the situation without just cause. There is no body cam footage showing my client acting aggressively because no such footage exists," Miller smirked, a condescending twist of his lips. "Body cams were not operational at the time of the arrest, but the officers' statements are more than enough evidence." Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. The officer's word was all they needed, so convenient. Hammer took the stand first, delivering his well-rehearsed lines with practiced smoothness. "The defendant was combative from the start," he recited. "Refused to exit the vehicle, raised his voice, created a hostile situation. Lies, every single word." Viper followed up, nodding along as he added, "He tensed up. We feared for our safety. We had no choice but to restrain him." More lies piled on top of the first. Marcus's fingers curled into fists under the table. He had spent his entire career fighting against this kind of blatant corruption, against these exact tactics, and now he was living it firsthand. Judge Vance barely hid her impatience, glancing at Marcus's lawyer. "Anything else, Mr. Rodriguez?" Rodriguez hesitated. He knew this judge, knew her track record. She wasn't interested in fairness, only expediency. Still, he swallowed hard and pushed forward. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Marcus Thorne to the stand." This was it. As Marcus rose and walked to the witness stand, he could feel every pair of eyes on him, watching, judging, waiting to see if he would break. The courtroom, usually a place where he wielded power, was now a crucible designed to burn away his truth. But he wouldn't break. He couldn't, because what was about to happen would change everything. He wasn't just here to defend himself against false charges. He was here to expose the truth, to reveal the unseen advantage he held, and to shatter the illusion of their authority. This courtroom, with its biased judge and confident prosecutor, was a microcosm of a larger systemic injustice. It highlights the crushing psychological pressure faced by defendants, especially those from marginalized communities, who often walk into courtrooms where the cards are already stacked against them. Their truth is dismissed, their character assassinated, and their rights trampled, all under the guise of justice. It's a stark reminder of how seemingly small injustices can be amplified within a system that inherently favors one side over another. But Marcus, unlike many who found themselves in his position, wasn't just another defendant. He was an unseen architect, meticulously planning his counterattack. His strategic patience, his decision to wait, to let them dig their own grave with their lies, was a testament to his legal brilliance and his unwavering resolve. He knew the truth wasn't enough. He needed to expose the lie in a way that couldn't be ignored. The air was thick with the weight of expectation, but only Marcus knew the full force of the storm he was about to unleash. Marcus sat in the witness chair, exhaling slowly as the court clerk swore him in. His hands rested lightly on his lap, but inside, a quiet storm was brewing. He wasn't here just to defend himself. He was here to expose the truth that had been buried under layers of lies. Prosecutor Daniel Miller stepped forward, pacing just slightly, an unnecessary display of confidence radiating from him. "Mr. Thorne, would you say you complied with the officer's instructions during your traffic stop?" Marcus met his gaze, calm, controlled. "I asked why I was being ordered out of my car. That's not illegal." Miller feigned a sigh, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "You refused to exit, correct?" "I asked why I was being asked to step out," Marcus repeated, his voice unwavering, "which legally I have the right to do." Miller smirked, glancing at the jury, as if Marcus's intelligence was an inconvenience, a nuisance to his straightforward case. "And after multiple orders, you still didn't comply?" Marcus held his stare, refusing to break. "Because there was no lawful reason to." Miller turned to the judge, shaking his head, a dismissive gesture indicating he expected nothing less from this defendant. "Your Honor, it's clear the defendant—" "Before we go any further," Marcus interjected, his voice even, cutting through the prosecutor's monologue with an unexpected sharpness that brought the room to a hush, "I should probably disclose something." Silence. Miller hesitated, mid-sentence, his brow furrowed. Even Judge Eleanor Vance, who had barely acknowledged Marcus' existence, looked up, actually looking at him for the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise in her eyes. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus reached into his briefcase. His lawyer, Thomas Rodriguez, tensed, leaning forward, unsure of what was happening. With agonizing slowness, Marcus pulled out his badge, a small, simple rectangle that had suddenly become the most dangerous, most explosive thing in this courtroom. "I'm Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice cutting through the thick tension like a perfectly honed blade. "Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas." The room froze. Judge Vance's lips parted slightly, her gavel hovering over her desk, unmoving, as if she'd been turned to stone. The officers stiffened, their previous smugness evaporating like mist in the sun. Viper's knee began bouncing frantically under the table, a nervous tick. Hammer's jaw went tight, his face draining of all color. Miller's confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a ghastly pale mask of utter shock. Excuse me?" Miller stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus tilted his head, a hint of steel in his eyes. "Did I stutter?" He lifted his ID for all to see. "That's what this says, doesn't it?" And just like that, the entire case imploded. The carefully constructed lies shattered. Judge Vance slowly sat back, her mouth pressing into a thin, grim line. She knew. She understood the catastrophic implications. If she ruled against Marcus now, if she dismissed his testimony and sided with these officers, this wouldn't just be another forgotten case of a black man being railroaded. It would be a monumental scandal. The courtroom wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It was a powder keg, and Marcus, with one simple, undeniable truth, had just lit the fuse. Judge Vance's grip on her gavel tightened, but she didn't slam it down. Not yet. She was thinking, calculating. This wasn't just a routine traffic stop gone bad. This was a career-ending disaster waiting to happen for everyone involved. Miller swallowed hard. His confidence, the smooth arrogance he had worn so easily, was gone, replaced by naked panic. He turned to the officers, and for the first time, Hammer and Viper looked genuinely, utterly terrified. This was the ultimate plot twist, a classic mic drop moment that laid bare the raw mechanics of power. The panic of the judge and prosecutor wasn't born from a sudden revelation of justice, but from the systemic fear of exposure. It was the realization that their usual tactics wouldn't work on someone with the protective shield of federal authority. It starkly highlighted the immense privilege and protection afforded to certain individuals within the legal system, revealing how the same unjust tactics are often used against others who lack such a shield. The moment of revelation wasn't just a personal victory for Marcus. It was a devastating crack in the system itself, a public unmasking of the true imbalance of justice. Marcus sat there, watching the silent scramble for control. Prosecutor Daniel Miller was a picture of contained panic. I wasn't aware of this information," Miller stammered, flipping through his files like a man desperately searching for an escape hatch. "Your Honor, Judge Eleanor Vance raised a hand, silencing him with a sharp gesture. For the first time, her eyes, now cold and assessing, locked onto Marcus's. His very presence in that witness stand was now a threat. A government prosecutor, a black man, wrongfully arrested, assaulted, lied about. Had this gone unnoticed, he could have been another nameless statistic. She knew it. She turned to the officers. Officer Hayes, Officer Jenkins. Both men snapped to attention, rigid in their seats, like children about to be scolded. "Would you like to amend your statements?" Silence. A crack in their composure. Marcus could see it happening. Officer Hayes's fingers curled around his knee, a desperate, nervous tick. Officer Jenkins looked at Miller as if hoping for a lifeline, but Miller had none to give. Marcus spoke first, his voice calm, cutting through their fear. "Before they answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to request that the court pull the dispatch call logs from the night of my arrest." Miller flinched. Marcus wasn't guessing. He knew how these things worked. If those officers had radioed in before the stop, their lie about the taillight wouldn't hold up. If they hadn't, then they had violated protocol from the very start. Judge Vance studied him for a long moment. She was trapped. If she denied his request, she was burying evidence. If she approved it, she was handing Marcus the final nail in the coffin of their lies. She cleared her throat, a sound heavy with resignation. "Request granted." Hayes exhaled sharply, his composure finally cracking. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched. They knew what was coming. This case wasn't staying inside this courtroom. It started with a single reporter in the back, a young journalist from the Oakwood Daily Herald, furiously typing on her laptop, her eyes wide with the unfolding drama. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. By the next morning, Marcus's name was everywhere. Assistant U.S. Attorney wrongfully arrested by Oakwood cops. Federal prosecutor exposes corrupt officers in open court. Judge under fire for bias against black defendant who was a government lawyer. The internet erupted. Social media was flooded with clips from inside the courtroom taken by people who had attended the trial. The moment Marcus revealed his badge became a viral video, spreading across platforms like wildfire. Cable news stations ran segments on the case's implications. How many others had been railroaded like Marcus, but without the power or position to fight back? But the biggest shift happened in Oakwood Heights itself. Community activists organized rallies. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, their voices rising in a powerful chorus, demanding accountability. Civil rights attorneys, inspired by Marcus's bravery, dug into old cases handled by Judge Vance, looking for patterns of bias for similar injustices. And then the real blow landed: an anonymous leak of internal police records, emails between officers discussing how to justify questionable stops, chilling statements from other black drivers who had been pulled over, cited for false violations, then threatened with arrest if they dared to argue. The case wasn't just about Marcus Thorne anymore. It was about a system that had been operating in the dark for years, preying on the vulnerable. And now, the floodlights were on. The backlash was immediate. City officials scrambled, their carefully constructed facades crumbling. The police department issued a carefully worded performative statement, an internal investigation. Marcus had seen it all before: a distraction, a way to pacify the public without making real fundamental changes. But this time, it wasn't enough. The pressure kept building. A civil rights attorney filed a federal lawsuit against the department on behalf of past victims. Community leaders demanded Judge Vance be removed from the bench. Protesters refused to back down, their chants echoing through the city streets. And then, the real moment of reckoning came. The case was handed over to the Texas Attorney General for review. Marcus sat in his apartment watching the press conference. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from journalists, from lawyers, from people who had been through exactly what he had, but didn't have the badge to fight back. This wasn't just damage control anymore. They were running out of ways to hide. And Judge Vance? She knew it. By the time Marcus returned to court for the verdict, her expression had changed. No more casual disinterest, no more overconfidence. She was staring at a case too big to bury, too public to ignore, and she had to decide which side of history she wanted to land on. The courtroom was silent. Judge Vance cleared her throat, the immense weight of the past few weeks, the protests, the media scrutiny, the leaked files, sitting heavily on her shoulders. She had no good options left. She looked down at her notes, but everyone knew this decision wasn't hers alone anymore. It was the public's. She exhaled, setting her gavel down softly, the sound resonating through the hushed room. After reviewing the evidence, the court finds the defendant. She hesitated just for a second, then finally, decisively, not guilty. A wave of relief crashed through Marcus, but he didn't move, didn't react. Not yet. Because the case wasn't just about him. The officers sat stiffly, their faces pale, their careers flashing before their eyes. Officer Jenkins's hands were clenched. Officer Hayes, always the more arrogant of the two, leaned forward. "Your Honor, she held up a hand, silencing him. "The court will also be forwarding all relevant materials to the state attorney's office for further review." That was it. The officers weren't walking away from this. The courtroom erupted, murmurs, gasps, the rapid clicking of reporters' keyboards. For the first time, the system had turned its gaze back on itself. Marcus stood slowly. His lawyer, Thomas Rodriguez, patted his back. But Marcus's eyes were on the officers, on Prosecutor Daniel Miller, who looked like he'd just lost everything, on the judge who had spent years dismissing cases like his until she was forced to do otherwise. But most of all, he thought about the people who weren't in this room, the countless individuals who had sat in this very spot before him, who had faced the same lies, the same bias, but who never got to walk free. As he stepped out of the courtroom, the cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, people cheered, their voices echoing in the warm Texas air. But Marcus wasn't celebrating, because this wasn't the victory. This was proof. Proof of what had always been happening, what so many had suffered in silence. Only now, with the world watching, had the system been forced to react. And he knew the fight wasn't over. Not for him, not for the people still trapped in it. He stepped past the flashing lights and into the crowd, where voices demanded real, lasting change. Because one case, one victory, wasn't enough. And now nobody was looking away. As the last echoes of the verdict faded in that Texas courtroom, Marcus Thorne knew his fight was just one battle in a much larger war. It was a victory, yes, but more importantly, it was proof. Proof of what had always been happening, what countless individuals, especially black men and women, had suffered in silence. Marcus's story is a raw, powerful reminder for all of us that the fight for justice is never truly over, and that systemic biases, when exposed, can trigger a demand for change that simply cannot be ignored. His courage didn't just clear his name, it ignited a fire in an entire community, turning a personal injustice into a blueprint for accountability. If Marcus's fight resonated with you, if it angered you, inspired you, or just made you think, then hit that like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more powerful stories of resilience and justice. And most importantly, share this video. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that every voice matters and that true justice demands holding power accountable. Because the more people who refuse to look away, the harder it becomes for these cases to be swept under the rug. And that, my friends, is how change truly begins.